our speaker today, the 17th Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley. She was born and raised in Alberta and is the daughter of former Alberta NDP leader and MLA Grant Notley and Sandra Mary Wilkinson. She credits her mother for making her aware of the injustices of society and getting her involved in activism, taking her to an anti-war demonstration before she was 10 years old. The value of helping others resonated with Sandra's young daughter, and Rachel has been active in community service ever since. Our Premier earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Alberta and a law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto. Following graduation, Rachel returned to Alberta and worked for the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. She later worked in BC and was involved in drafting new workplace health and safety standards. She and her husband, Lou Arab, returned to Alberta in 2002 to raise their 2 young children. Rachel Notley was first elected to the Legislative Assembly in 2008. In 2014, she won the Alberta New Democratic leadership election and went on to lead the party with a majority victory in the 2015 provincial election. Today, she will be sharing with us how her team is fighting for Albertans every day. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Notley, Premier of Alberta.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jennifer, for that very kind introduction. It is really a tremendous pleasure for me to be able to join you all here today in this beautiful hotel, and also to be with all of you here on the traditional territories of the signatories to Treaty 7, and to join with you as we acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta, who we know share a very deep connection with this land across the province. Let me begin by thanking, again, all of the organizers who worked so hard today to bring us all together for this lovely lunch. I want to also thank everyone who is here today for braving another day of this slightly brutal cold to be here this afternoon, because it is a little cold. You know, Calgary is now in its longest cold stretch in a decade, I'm told. But, you know, I also think we're pretty tough, and we're pretty good at taking it. Right now, in other parts of the country, people are being warned not to travel unnecessarily, and in many cases not to go to school or to work or any of those things. Here in Alberta, the Weather Channel is just advising us this time to put on bigger coats, bigger boots, and walk faster, which is what we're doing. So nonetheless, jokes aside, I would really like to be able to talk with you a bit about a subject that I believe you are all very, very familiar with. And I think it's pretty much the bread and butter of Rotarians in our province, and that is helping Albertans. Every day you choose to carry the weight and live up to the promise of citizenship. And in a world where, you know, so many people seem to revel sometimes in division and anger, you choose to bring people together through your service, to help people who are in need. Your choices have left an indelible mark on the city of Calgary, from growing the Calgary Foundation, to helping the homeless, to playing important roles in developing Mount Royal University, the Boys and Girls Club of Calgary, the Children's Hospital, and the Calgary Stampede. The Rotary Club of Calgary has been a tremendous force for generosity for more than a century. And the best part is, none of you actually have to do this work. You choose to do this work. You choose to spend your time helping to make life better for people in your community. And for that, I am truly honored to be able to be with you here today, sharing some of my thoughts. So in the time that I have, I'd like to speak to you a little bit about choices. The choices that we made as a government to help see Albertans through the worst of the downturn, the choices that we are now making to make sure that the economic recovery that we are starting to see ultimately reaches everyone, and the choice ahead for how we put this city and, quite frankly, our whole province on a more secure and resilient footing going forward. So let me start at the beginning. When we took office in 2015, as was described by Jennifer, the price of oil was collapsing. Jobs were being lost, and families across this city and around this province felt a profound level of anxiety, as in many cases, many of them were actually being faced right head on with serious economic hardships in their own lives. And there was a big debate in the legislature at that time on how we should handle this. Now, our opponents at the time, they wanted us, and quite frankly, they still want us, to make big cuts. Cuts to our schools, to our hospitals, to our training centers, to our highways, to our bridges, and more. Call it the austerity approach. Now, we've seen it before. The price of oil goes down, nurses and teachers get fired, schools and hospitals get cut, infrastructure projects get canceled or delayed, and the cycle continues. But we believed that that was not exactly what Albertans had elected us to do. And I remember at one point a conversation that I had with my campaign team before the election. It was a slightly smaller team at the time. But nonetheless, we were putting it together and getting ready for the election. And I said to them, you know what? We need to run on stable, predictable services for people. My team was a little skeptical. They kind of looked at me and went, yeah, that's super sexy. I can see people really getting behind that. Seemed to work out okay. Because we prioritized, we made that decision, we ran on that, and I believe that we have delivered that. Because we prioritized stable, predictable funding for schools, for hospitals, for universities, for municipalities, and more, we have had nearly 4 years of drama-free, compassionate, and forward-looking management of some of the areas that matter most to Alberta families. The fundamentals: good public schools for our kids, hospitals for our loved ones, safe, dignified care for our seniors. And you see the results of those decisions more concretely in the new Calgary Cancer Centre, which is finally, after decades, under construction, and the Green Line expansion, two of the largest construction projects in the history of this city. And you can also see it in the over 40 schools here in Calgary that are being built or modernized. All of these are things that will make life better for hundreds of thousands of people right across this city. And they help to create good jobs when good jobs were needed most. Now, as we continue to work to create jobs and fuel the economic recovery, we are also working to make sure that this recovery is different. Different in that it must be recovery that is not only built to last, which is something I'll talk to you about in a bit, but also that it is a recovery that is built for the benefit of everyone. A recovery where we emerge with greater equality, not greater inequality. A recovery that is felt from the boardrooms to the very margins of society and at kitchen tables everywhere in between. Like Rotarians, we choose to protect and empower the most vulnerable among us, complementing so much, quite frankly, of the great work that you all do, such as your work to empower and support people through the Community Hubs Initiative, a key part of the United Way of Calgary's Enough for All strategy. And given that this work is so critical to what Rotarians represent, I want to speak for a moment about how we are, I think, pulling in the same direction. For instance, the groundbreaking work that we have been doing as a government on affordable housing with many, many partners throughout society, municipal, nonprofits, federal government, or the introduction of the Alberta Child Benefit and the Alberta Family Employment Tax Credit. Rolls right off the tongue, I know, but the thing of it is it is one of the most significant advances in poverty reduction in generations. Or our work to increase the minimum wage and put more money in the pockets of our lowest paid workers. And on that subject, if you'll permit me for a moment, I'd like to say a few words on this because we've had a little bit of breaking news just earlier today. My opponent in the next election announced today that he would begin steps to dismantle our work to secure a fair minimum wage, exempting both alcohol servers and young workers from its application. With respect to young workers, what that will mean is that many people who turn 18 will find themselves losing jobs. And moreover, this minimum wage actually means a lot to these young workers. I have personally lost count of the number of times I've had young people approach me in stores or at restaurants and tell me, just organically, how the change in the minimum wage means that they can continue their studies at school while working part-time to supplement their income and make that dream of a post-secondary education affordable to them. And with respect to alcohol services or servers, that is quite frankly, a massive, massive loophole through which we can expect many employers to drive through at the expense of workers. And quite honestly, it should come as no surprise that roughly 2/3 of those workers who will lose out through this policy announcement made today are women. Now, I realize there are different views about the minimum wage, but my question is this. What does it say about a leader who praises a flat tax, which would mean a $700 million tax break to the top 1% of people in our society, and then today turns around and promises to cut the wages of the Albertans who make the least? I think it says everything you need to know about his priorities and who he will govern for. But those are their priorities, and I'm here mostly, notwithstanding today's announcement this morning, to talk about our priorities. So take, for instance, our school nutrition program. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but it is making a big difference in the lives of a lot of kids. Over 35,000 of them. Recently, I was speaking with a staff member at a school where we brought in our nutrition program. And she told me of a little girl who came up to her one day at lunch looking sad and holding out a quarter. And the staff member thought the little girl sort of misunderstood what the program was about. And she told the little girl that she didn't have to pay, that the program was free for her, that's the way it worked. But she insisted, and she held out that quarter and said, please keep this money because I need this food every single day and I don't want it to end. So my friends, this was a real need, and this was a real story, and this little girl is part of our future. All of these kids are our future, and we are investing in those kids, in good meals, and in making sure that with those good meals, when they are at their schools, they can get the best education possible. Now, we're also tackling increasing childcare costs. Just last week, I'm sure you guys would have noticed, we saw reports that peg childcare costs in Alberta, including here in Calgary, as some of the highest in the country. And that's why I'm proud that our government is piloting a $25 a day childcare program, and we've expanded it to cover thousands of families. But we do absolutely need to do more. And mark my words, we will do more. It makes a real difference in the lives of people, which we are learning firsthand. I guess at a couple of those child care centers, some families didn't know that theirs was part of the pilot program and their child care bill was going to go down. And at one center, a young woman who was also parenting alone came to the center to pay her monthly bill. And because she didn't know that this was one of these pilot programs, she had no idea she was getting a break. And when she did, she broke down in tears. And the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of people out there, there are a lot of women out there who think that this kind of help for working women and families, who know that this kind of help makes a profound difference in the lives of working women and in young families generally. Overall, going forward in Calgary, we cannot have young people coming to this city and sitting down and deciding that they have to make a choice between having children or paying a mortgage. We can do better, and that's what we're committed to doing. The same goes for our work to better support Albertans who rely on AISH, Alberta Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped. About 250,000 people in Alberta, some of whom are our most vulnerable people in our society, receive some form of income support, including AISH. Now, while there was an increase in AISH in 2012, for many people, their income support levels had actually not changed for over a decade. And rates, as a result, had been allowed to fall well behind inflation. For instance, imagine a single mother with 2 kids, someone who might have a chronic illness or health issue for which she's been getting treatment. That mother had been getting a rate that hadn't changed for over 10 years. The consumer price index over that time changed by 20%. Everyday essentials like clothes, groceries, all those things kept going up, but the amount of money that she had to support herself and her kids stayed flat. So we tackled that We provided long overdue increases to those benefits, and then we tied them legislatively to inflation, helping to make life better and more affordable for vulnerable people across Alberta and ensuring that they are never allowed to fall so far behind again. Now, I could go on and on about this part of our work. My kids tell me that I do that quite regularly, actually. But the point is this: inequality hurts our communities. Inequality hurts our cities. Inequality hurts our entire economy. Inequality hurts everybody in this province. And when women are left out of the workforce, we are lesser for it. When a child is forced to go to school hungry, we are lesser for it. When there aren't enough teachers in our classrooms or nurses at the bedsides of our loved ones, we are lesser for it. But here's the thing: we're Albertans, and lesser isn't in us. We are in this together. We are stronger, in my view, when we defend one another and when we keep fighting for everyone. Now, of course, we have to do more than just fight for these programs. We have to fund them. I know that. We have to put our public services on a more stable and predictable footing. Now, to be sure, while we have worked to create jobs and to fund our public services, I should begin by saying there are areas where we've actually made significant cuts. And I want to just give you a few examples. But before I do that, I do want to say this. I believe that the former government accomplished many, many positive things on behalf of the people of Alberta throughout its 44-year tenure. And I know that they did so by listening to the good advice of many of you here today. But I think that we can also agree that towards the end, their priorities turned inwards. We saw that firsthand when we took over. We inherited overinflated salaries for some heads of governments, agencies, boards, and commissions, and a range of backroom deals and perks for insiders, such as, the much talked about taxpayer-funded golf club memberships. We saw travel and hospitality budgets for politicians absolutely balloon. So we got to work and we reined it all in. For instance, in the case of politicians' travel and hospitality, we cut that by over 85%, from $27 million a year under the old government to less than $4 million a year under ours. And we kept the focus where it needs to be, on people, and on the things that people need to stay strong during and after a downturn. And to be fair, some of you may still be thinking, well, that's all great, Premier, but I'm not sure that we can afford all of this. Fair enough. Our opponents in the legislature agree with us, and in fact, they even go further. They say we need to cut deeply to balance the budget and to do it as quickly as possible. But contrary to what my opponents say, I say this. I believe that a more responsible approach is to bring the budget to balance thoughtfully and carefully in a measured, predictable way. 2 years ago, we laid out a clear path to balance with clear targets where we would balance by 2023. And we have been meeting or beating those targets every step of the way, sticking to our clear path to balance the budget while protecting and improving the things that families need. Our province has the strongest balance sheet in the country now, and it will remain that way in 2023 when the budget is balanced. And in the process, our kids will keep the teachers they need, and our loved ones the caregivers that they need. Now, we all know that if we're going to unlock Alberta's potential truly, though, going forward, and focus on that more resilient footing going forward, regardless of what happens with the price of oil, then we know there's other stuff that we need to do. And in particular, we need to make progress on diversifying our economy. So before I conclude my remarks, I just want to talk a little bit about that. Because in my opinion, this is the most urgent challenge that we as Albertans face. And so in response, we are, in fact, moving on many, many fronts. We cut the small business tax by 1/3. We've made capital available to businesses to help them grow and to hire. We've kept Alberta's $11 billion tax advantage secure. We're investing in agriculture and manufacturing and tourism and high tech. And when it comes to high-tech jobs, we will have some significant news to share with Albertans tomorrow. News that will help our economy diversify even further. But in the time that I have left, I want to focus on how we are working to diversify and add value to the energy resources that each and every one of you own. Work that can enable us to continue to support a strong, inclusive, and caring civil society. So we're working in two distinct ways. First, We are fighting to get new pipelines built so we can diversify our export markets and get more value for our oil. All of us in this room understand how critical this is to our economy and to Canada's economy. It just has to happen. And second, we are working closely with investors and made-in-Alberta companies to diversify the energy resources that we have right here in Alberta. So on the matter of pipelines, as Calgarians are well aware, the setbacks that we've been facing have been frustrating. We know that. But let me be very clear. They are only setbacks. I'm not giving up. And no Albertan should give up. It is too important. And that's why, when things got tough, and I could spend an hour and a half here talking to you about this particular issue, but on one particular element of it, when it got really tough and we looked like we were almost going to lose the Kinder Morgan pipeline, we pushed very hard, successfully, to get the federal government to step in and build that and buy the pipeline. And so that we removed the investment risk and the pipeline remains a going concern. And it's also why, as Premier, pretty much from day one since I've been elected, we've traveled, and I've traveled, from one end of this country to the other, making sure that all Canadians understand the importance of our energy industry and the way it creates good jobs and good opportunities for all Canadians. And to be clear, as I do this, I don't do this from a pulpit where my starting point is that about dividing Canada. Because quite honestly, if that's the way we approach convincing the rest of Canadians to have our backs, we will lose. My approach has been to build Canada, to unite Canada, to bring Canadians to our cause, to fight with us and for us. And I think that we are beginning to make progress. Canadians from coast to coast are getting behind us, and that includes a majority of our neighbours in BC. Today, thanks to our efforts and the efforts of all Albertans, the need to build new pipelines is a majority opinion in Canada. We've gone from 4 in 10 to 7 in 10 Canadians supporting this issue. And in a couple of weeks, the National Energy Board comes back with its decision on the parts of the project that the courts told them they had to revisit. Now, we don't know what that decision will be, but if it goes as we hope, it will be a significant milestone and a significant signal and a major step forward that we are back on track with this project. And let me say again, I absolutely believe that Trans Mountain will be built, and I won't stop until it is built. Now, while we're working to get the pipeline back on track, we're not just sitting around and twiddling our fingers and waiting for the economy to diversify itself. Quite frankly, we're going to take the bull by the horns and start working very hard to get it done. We have to stop talking about this issue of diversification and start working on it in a really focused way. And so we are doing that with the single largest energy diversification effort since the days of Premier Peter Lougheed. Now, before I go any further, I do want to make something very, very clear. I believe in effective government, not necessarily big government, and which is why the private sector is our valued partner in this work. And while our partners in the private sector do an incredible job, innovating, exploring, and staying competitive, it is in all of our interest to help propel resource development in Alberta into new areas of opportunity. Where there is value for Albertans, where there are jobs to be created, and where there is a responsible, publicly accountable, and effective way for government to help. An effective government should do just that. Premier Lougheed recognized this when he helped to build the early petrochemical industry in Alberta. But since his time, we've done very little to diversify. Alberta has missed out on upgrading, on manufacturing, and job opportunities that, quite frankly, went to places like Louisiana and Pennsylvania. And as a result, we've been left more vulnerable to international fluctuations in the price of oil. We all know that we need to fix this problem. And that's exactly why our Made in Alberta Energy Diversification Plan sets out to do just that. We introduced the plan last spring. We set aside $3 billion in the form of royalty credits, loan guarantees, and grants. And then we said to investors around the world, show us a responsible, fully costed plan, third-party validated, with a clear return on investment for Albertans, one that gets value from our resources where currently we get none, and the Government of Alberta will work with you. And so I'm pleased to report to you that this work is actually showing big results. Over the last while, the first steps of our plan, just the first steps, have generated $10 billion in new private sector investment, all of it in upgrading, in refining, and in projects that diversify what we do with our energy product right here in Alberta. That includes the announcement that Calgary-based Pembina Pipeline Corporation made last week that they're going to build a massive new petrochemical project here in Alberta, a $4.5 billion investment, creating an estimated 3,000 jobs. It includes the announcements a couple of weeks before that of Calgary-based Value Creation, a $2.5 billion investment in new upgrading and refining here in Alberta, creating over 2,000 jobs, which we backstopped with a loan guarantee, and which we helped attract with the Made in Alberta plan. And a couple of weeks ago, I visited one of the first projects to benefit from the plan, which was Interpipeline's $3.5 billion Heartland Petrochemical Complex. And that project, backed by royalty credits, is creating more than 2,300 jobs. And the CEO of Interpipeline at that time put it well while speaking to investors. He said, what was once ultimately being burned and sent up the chimney is now being turned into one of the most valuable recyclable plastics in the world. So that's exactly what we need to see more of in Alberta. Let's stop burning our resources for nothing and start delivering on the full potential of this province with more refining, more upgrading, more value, and more good jobs for people all across our economy. So, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, the future is not found. The future is made. Alberta's best is not behind us, it is ahead of us. And it is alive and well in the incredible spirit of generosity that animates the work that you do as Rotarians. And like you, I'm going to keep fighting for an Alberta that works for everyone, an Alberta where people come first, an Alberta, a Calgary, where we don't sacrifice our quality of life and what makes our economy strong and attractive through a reckless race to the bottom, but rather an Alberta in which we take advantage of what makes this the best place on earth to call home. I am inspired by an Alberta that is younger and more diverse than it has ever been, comfortable and proud of what it's becoming. I am inspired by an Alberta where women's lives, struggles, and ambitions are reflected in the cares and concerns of their government. And I am inspired by the optimistic, confident, and hopeful Alberta that is this province at